Hey, welcome guys. So today we are going to finish up. We've technically already finished it up, but we have our DOS work, the Blitz by Takom Panther. Now, I know in my previous videos on it, we kind of talked about, it's a cheap kit, it's under $30, so we were going to kind of build it as that type kit. I think I got a little bit carried away. Did quite a few weathering steps and between the paint job and everything, so it's a really fun kit. It's a really great kit for the price. Honestly, pretty hard to beat. But at the end of the day, I still, and I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but it's still kind of funny that it's a quote-unquote blitz, because it's a Panther. There's a lot of road wheels. You're gonna have to do a 3 camo camouflage. You don't have to, but that's what comes in the kit and the instructions. So there is a lot of time that will go into this. Yes, the build time might be 6 hours or so, but the painting and weathering time definitely far exceeds that. So if you really like to paint and weather, if that's your favorite part, really a great kit. But enough of this. Let's flip it over to the bench and let's see how we got this finished product. All right, so first we're going to start off with this dark brown wash that we have. This is Ammo by Migs. It's specifically for, like, I forget what the label just said, for like DAC vehicles. So dark yellow, really, that like sand color. I just find that 90% of the time, dark brown's going to be the best wash for really any color. It works the best with green, which is also why I'm using it here. It does get a little bit lost in the red, but not so much of a bad thing. If you use black, it gets really intense really quick. I did use it on the Panzer, which was the Panzer 1, which was Panzer Gray, and it stood out a lot. So I prefer the dark brown, especially with like the yellow and green, which again is 2/3 of this vehicle. I just think it does the best job if you have to just use one. So we're gonna put this on everything, just like we would with any of our pin washes. Key here is we're gonna let it sit, not too long, but I always like to let my washes sit overnight. If you watch any of my other videos, I do say that probably every single time, but what it's gonna do is it's going to just start to dry. This is an enamel product, so it does take a really long time. Maybe after a day it would be dry. It would still reactivate with thinner. It might be a little bit tough to scrub off, but if you let it sit for that kind of 8 to 12 hours, it really makes it so when we're going to come in here with the Q-tip, you will not be able to pull off anything in any of these recessed areas. That being said, sometimes you need to come back, like in this case, we needed to come back with the brush with a little bit of enamel thinner just to tone it down. What you do want to make sure of, though, is that when you're putting the wash on, if you have any big areas where the thinner kind of pools outward, you just really want to keep an eye on those, because if you let them dry, this is what happened also to me on the Panzer 1. I wanted to do it that next morning. I wasn't able to till that next night. So if time gets away from you with this method, you can be left with little, circular pools of thinner that do have a little bit of pigment in them. So you just want to keep an eye on that as soon as you're kind of done with this Q-tip method. Or if you come back with a brush, as soon as that thinner dries, come back and make sure that you're happy. Because once that thinner dries and you let it sit another day, that's really it. You can obviously put dust and dirt effects over it, but that wash is solidified where it's going to be, and so is that thinner, and you'll get that kind of stain. But I like to start with the Q-tip, really, because you're just spreading the pigment around. There's very little thinner left in it. There's still enough to move it around, and you're just going to create like a layer of grime. Like if you left your car out, all year to get blasted by sand and dirt and rain, and it's just going to pack it into the paint. That's, in my mind at least, what the first initial pin wash is going to do. By not taking it all off with thinner and kind of spreading it around, that's the effect we're going to get. Next, we're going to come in with the track wash. I did paint these tracks in Tamiya's Dark Iron. I think it's the XF 84, 85. And it's a really great color, but it looks really new. It looks like what the tracks might look like the day they came out of the factory. It looks like NATO black with like metallic pigments in it. So this wash is just going to give us, especially on the tracks on the side, which I painted with Ammo by Migs, like rusty track color, dark tracks. I forget exactly what it's called, but that really makes those look rusty and gives us a good base for doing some rust pigments and things later. But then on the tracks on the ground, it's really just your first layer of kind of mud or dirt, rust, whatever it is that you're looking to kind of add later. This is a really, really good base. And it's a really quick way. I've seen a lot of really cool looking methods, painting tracks. They all seem amazing, but maybe time consuming. So this is a good, quick way to just get that color that we're looking for that we can build off of. Next up, and I don't take that track wash off. I let that dry at least for like 24 hours and just let it sit on the model. It does, yes, flow into the recessed parts, but it really stains the tracks that whole color. And because you don't remove it and because it flows into certain areas, it does give a little bit of color variation, which I think is nice, especially on top of that, the dark iron color. Next up, we are going to do, while it's drying, we're going to do our chipping. I still have, this is what I use on every single vehicle. It's Ammo by Migs, just their chipping color. And it's really great. You can make this color yourself. It's really just a kind of dark brown reddish color, but it's really nice and convenient having it. Those Ammo by Mig paints are, I think they're like $2 or $3, so I would definitely recommend one if you don't have one. I don't like sponge chipping. I do say this every single time. I prefer to do it with a small, really thin brush. Especially, I didn't want to over chip this vehicle. So by doing it with a really, really small brush, as you can see, there's no huge chips sticking out. We were able to just highlight really some of those edges. Not even so much chip, just kind of highlight. Next up, we're going to do some streaking grime. And for whatever reason, the Ammo by Mig streaking grime I have it's super thin. And I find if I brush this in the downward direction, it really, really pools at the bottom. And then when we clean it off later, it almost like there's nothing left on the top. It's almost like only streaking effects on the bottom. So I do find that I have to kind of pull it upwards as you see I'm painting upwards. Sometimes I have to come back and kind of pull it upwards. As you can see here, it's starting to really pool. So a little bit of an annoyance, but nothing that we can't work through. And I think seeing the finished product in the end, it all turned out perfectly fine. So we're just taking our brush here. It is I forget the exact name of this brush, but it's as you can see, it kind of has a bunch of different length bristles in it. It makes a bunch of little V's. We're just going to dip that in thinner, blot it on a paper towel so that it's damp, but it's not wet. I let these streaking effects dry for at least 30 minutes. You could let them dry longer. Just like the washes, you could let them sit overnight if you wanted to. It would be a lot harder to get them to come off, and they'd be more pronounced. So I think I was probably around 45 minutes here, which is going to give us, especially on like the yellow, I didn't want it to sit too long because it would be really pronounced. It, again, like the other wash, will kind of blend in with the red, but it stands out really, really well, I think, on the green is where it kind of shows up best and really changes the color of the green. And then obviously brushing in a downward direction. I would say start at the bottom, like even just with a brush stroke or two, start at the bottom of where that particular streak is. And then, work your way to the top, all while brushing downward. That way you maintain the streak effect at the top. If you start at the top right away, again, it's an easy way to kind of get left with just a streaking effect at the bottom. Now I let that dry for a good 24 hours. I have been kind of experimenting back and forth with doing these separate and then doing them at the same time, as you've probably seen in the last like 2 or 3 videos. This is the rain mark effect, which I'm really, really liking. I know I've said this before, broken record, but I don't like really any of the dust effects that I've ever used. In this, yes, it's a rain effect, but I mean, it's a dusty color, and it's going to give us exactly, in my mind, what we're looking for in terms of kind of a dusty tone. So on the turret there, I'm going to keep them a little bit more spread out and in the front of the hole here to really look more like rain marks. But then on like the sides where I know there's going to be dust and dirt on those side skirts, I'm going to keep them closer together, and I'm going to brush them off differently. So on the side of the turret here, really go for like a group of streaks, and then you got to clean your brush a little bit. You can maybe do like 3 to 5 streaks at a time before you're just going to be spreading that color all over. On the side skirts, I'm not going to clean my brush. I'm just going to keep brushing it in a downward direction. And that, again, playing around with these things, I've kind of found you're going to be spreading that around, right? So it's going to spread all over those side skirts. It's going to be less pronounced. You're going to have like less pronounced single rain streaks, rain mark effects, whatever. But as you can see there, you're going to get just a whole more like dusty look to it, which is, again, what I wanted more on the side skirts. But overall, it's pretty hard to notice, especially once we end up putting things on top of it. But this is what it looks like once all the thinners have dried. And I really, really like it. I really like it. You can still see the streaking effects didn't get worn off by the thinner because we let them set up and cure. And then that rain mark effect really, it changes the tones of the paint, right? It really gives it that kind of dusty look, like dust has, again, been like packed into the paint. Not that dust is sitting on top, that it's the paint is starting to wear away. The wind is whipping the dust into it. So I really, really like it, if you can't tell. Next up, we have a wood wash. A lot of dark brown washes, which I think is probably pretty normal in my videos at this point. This we're going to apply just all over the tools, and sometimes you have to do a couple different applications. Essentially, the goal is to layer, like really pile up this wood wash on the tool, and then start wiping it away. And where you're almost wiping it all away is where you want it to, like, that's where you want to leave it, right? So that you have some of that kind of wood grain. Like if you can imagine the wash being wiped with a Q-tip or a brush, and some leftovers there and that kind of horizontal long direction, that's what we're going to look for there. Next up, I have 3 different, just to change up the products, we're going to do some stippling here, but these are the Ammo by MIG splashes, and they make a mess, as the other liquid enamel, the AK products I've been using recently. So you see the little box that I have. I don't really like filming this because sometimes you hit the brush back towards you, and I don't want it getting on my camera. So I don't know. We'll see how much longer I film myself doing this in videos. I think all it'll take is some enamel paint on my camera lens, and that'll probably be it. But of course, concentrating, try not to do that. Try to go really slow and keep it, thin on your brush. It's okay if we get some big chunks. We can clean them up later, but what we really want is like a million really, really small, kind of in scale splashes, right? The bigger chunks that come off, they're too chunky. They're not really in scale. So just be patient with this and try to go slow. And then we're just going to clean up some of the kind of like overspray that got on the tracks. Just a little bit of enamel thinner. You can do the same. We'll do the same on the wheels in a second here. And I didn't use any thinner on the wheels. I just went with the Q-tip. It brings a little bit of kind of a dusty color to the rubber on the road wheels. I didn't want to make them too dusty, so just this little bit of effect I thought would be enough to kind of get the point across. But I do like when the rubber is still black. I think it just makes it looks like something different, right? There's a little bit more color in there. And that is, we've done 2 of our colors. So we did like the dry step and the dry earth. And we're going to save the dry or like the wet mud for later. So back to the tools. This is what I mean by start to wipe it off, but don't wipe it all off. We want to leave some of that streak effect left on it. That's going to be your wood grains, right? In your darker parts of the wood. Sometimes it turns out better than others. It is what it is. I find it's good enough. I'm not really hyper focusing on the tools when I look at my finished models. So there's definitely more in-depth ways to do it. But that's just the way I do it, which is quick and easy and gets you to move on to, I think, the more fun parts quicker. Then we're going to take that damp earth, and I'm just playing around a little bit at this point, because I wanted to do something to the inside of these tracks without doing too much. Again, I wanted the vehicle to look like it had been driving in dirt and mud. Maybe, a couple days ago, it's been dry. Maybe there's like a little bit of fresh mud here. So we're going to take that and we're going to really pack it into the, outside of the tracks, the part that you're going to really see. And we're going to use, because anything that has enamel thinner in it, you'll see is going to grab the pigment that we're going to put on later. And then just kind of experimenting here. I put that dry earth on, and then I did a quick cleanup with the Q-tip. A little bit scared to see how it was going to turn out at this point, but happy to say I think the effect worked really, really well. It leaves a lot of that kind of damp looking mud left in the crevices between the tracks without it going too crazy. And then quickly, before that product dries, which again, it does take at least several hours to start drying, we're going to take some pigment. It's going to look messy here. Don't worry, it's not all that messy. It's more wasteful than anything, probably. Again, just playing around with some of the products I have and trying to figure out some different ways to use them. You don't know if you don't try. So really trying to pack it into where that splash effect is sitting in those recessed areas. That's where I'm trying to get that to sit. Next up, we're going to I tried to go easy with the pigments on this tank on the top because I didn't want it to look too dirty, and pigments get really out of control really quick in my opinion. And it still looks cool because there's not really any other product that gives us like volume like pigments do. But again, they get out of control really quick. So we're going to do our Ammo by Mig oil brusher. And I think the more I use oils, the more I realize they're probably like the best product out there. So there's 2 ways I've found that you can use these effectively, at least for kind of what we're going to do here. And all we're going to do here is really make a pin wash. So you could make a pin wash in a palette, which I also did because I kind of wanted to try both here. The other method, put the oil brusher in a palette, use a fine brush as we have done here to apply it to the areas that we're going to want to really get the wash. We don't want it everywhere. We just want to make it look like there's some dirt. Then pretty much instantly, we're not going to let that dry too long. We're going to take our brush, which is going to be soaked pretty much every time you have to go back and re-soak it. We're going to soak it in enamel thinner. And when we touch the oil, give it just a little shake around, and it turns it into a wash, as you can see there. It's a little bit controllable because it's not going to go too far. You can, with the amount of thinner and the amount that you brush it, you can control, how far you want it to go, which is nice. And of course, we're going to use a couple different colors of our oil brushers just to create, some different tones of dirt and things on the tank. And we are going to use a little bit of pigment at the end, but just a little bit. We wanted this to be, call it 70 or 80% of that kind of dirt effect on the top of the tank. And then same thing here, we're really just making washes here. It's kind of like a live wash. And the really nice thing about oils is you have a long time to clean them up. So if you don't like the effect, you can I wouldn't say you can fully ever wipe it off. I guess if you really went for it, you could. It'll always stain a little bit, but you can remove as much as you want. And they're really easy to work with. They're a little intimidating at first, I think, for maybe someone that's newer in modeling, but you can see there on the side of the cupola, as that thinner dries, there's some oil there. Coming back with a dry brush 20 minutes later and noticing that, you can still just clean it up and kind of blend that oil together. So they're really nice to work with. I think it's one of the most dare I say revolutionary products in modeling, at least in recent modeling. Now that we've let those pigments kind of sit in that damp earth, whatever the splash effect was that we used, I'm gonna come in really quick with a little bit of thinner in this Q-tip, and we're just gonna do a really quick cleanup. I don't want to scrub it. I'm just really doing like 1 or 2 passes, and that's gonna be it. Again, this was a little bit of an experiment, but I just wanted to see kind of what it did. Takes a lot of product for what I did, but as you can see, it really did pack into the crevices, the recessed areas there, and it left our tracks not really too stained. I'm really happy with the way that the outside looks and the way that the inside looks. I know they don't necessarily match, but they might not in real life anyways, right? Because the inside's going to have a lot more friction with the road wheels and things like that, where the outside's only touching the ground, right? I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. Then we're going to come in with, we have like a track rust pigment. So again, just trying to bring a little bit something different, tone-wise and color-wise. And pigments, especially these rust pigments on exhausts and spare tracks, it just brings a really nice texture that I think makes everything just look a lot cooler. Then once we have it on, we're going to hit it with, we have the pigment fixer from Ammo by Mig. You could easily use just enamel thinner. It would work honestly just as well. I have the product, so I use it. I think it came in one of the packs that they do. And then very carefully, we're going to really try not to go too crazy here. We're going to come in with, this is like, I actually don't know how to say this, Golden Earth, whatever. someone can put in the comments how to pronounce it, and because I'm reading it, I still won't know how to pronounce it. But we're just gonna sprinkle a little bit of that all over the back, above the side skirts, and some of these areas that maybe some volumes of dirt would collect, but really trying not to go over the top with this here. Again, I want the oil brushers to show through. I want them to be a really good base, and then, you know, let these pigments bring, you know, another tone in, but also a little bit of volume and stuff. So I think they ended up looking really, really good. And something I didn't show, I also sprinkled them on the road wheels, just a little bit of pigment, and I think it ended up looking good. I haven't done it at this point. I just forgot to film it at the end. And then we're going to take that third color, that damp earth, and we're going to go back to the stippling that we did. And my thought here was, again, building up in layers of kind of what happens at what point. I wanted to get the splash effects from the dry, you know, the dry mud, dry step, whatever it was called, dry earth. I wanted to get that on first and then build up layers on top of it, and then come back with, you know, logically thinking the damp earth or mud, whatever that color is going to be the last thing that gets on it, right? It's going to be the freshest thing on there. So just played around with it a little bit, and there you have it. So it's a Blitz kit. It was a really, really great kit. I've probably said that a bunch of times now. It wasn't the most amazing kit that I've ever built in my life, but for like $25, this is definitely, I would say this is definitely a must build. I do still think it's really silly in general to have, I don't know, I can't get past the idea that having a heavy German tank as a Blitz, it just doesn't make any sense, because it still took a lot of time to paint, and a lot of time, you know, it's just a big vehicle, so weathering takes a long time, right? There's twice as much surface area as some tanks to weather some vehicles. So I don't know. I think it's just designed for people that want to weather and paint more than they want to build. But again, I just keep thinking, like, I spent more time on a Blitz kit than I did on some other Tamiya kits and stuff. So maybe Tamiya is just the ultimate Blitz kit. But I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I think there's a lot of weathering in here, but it doesn't look over the top. There's a lot of small, subtle effects that I think blend pretty well. There's definitely more we could have done to it, but I'm happy. I reached the point where I was like, okay, stop now. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have made it this far, I would please ask you, if you haven't already, of course, to like and subscribe to the channel. We will be doing many more model builds, of course. Next up, I believe, I know I did the Tiger review. I guess it was a week ago. I did get a little bit sidetracked on that project. I'm waiting on something to come in from someone that posted in the comments. They had some 3D printed parts they were going to donate to the build, which is amazing, from Fiddleworks. But I'm waiting for those to come in. So I'm going to start, I've actually already started building the Comet, which you will see. I'll post a review in a couple days here on that. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have some T-Rex 3D printed parts in that as well. And then we're going to obviously do the build, painting and weathering of that. But this wraps up the Panther. Not sure. I really like the paint scheme. I'm not sure I've ever seen one like this, but let me know what you think in the comments. And again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video.